Hey, Bob. So I'm filming this for future generations. So I don't know. I think the most important, maybe the most interesting part is the Van Zandt line because that's our name. And so I've got Dad is here, David Van Zandt, and his father was Loomis Van Zandt is here, and was kind of a lost loner type of a guy. I mean, not that he had good friends and stuff, and he made a mark upon the world, but he left home when he was 7 years old. He ran away or left home and lived with a neighbor's family because he didn't like his new stepmother. His mother had died at that point, and then he went on to become an artist, and then and of course, Dad didn't know him very well because Nana had left Loomis in 1930 or so. Dad was only 3 years old because Nana realized Loomis wasn't going to be able to provide for her, especially during the Great Depression. So she went to Reno, Nevada, which is the only place in America where you could get a no-fault divorce at the time. And that was it for Loomis. He stayed in New York, and he only met Dad a couple of times during his life before he died. Going on, Loomis didn't talk about his dad very much, and our family, didn't know much about Loomis's dad. And I think Mom and Dad did some genealogy, and they found a guy named Abram C. Van Zandt, and they assumed that must be Charles. And as it turns out, that is in fact his name, Abram Charles Platt Van Zandt. So it was confusing because there was a Abraham P. Van Zandt, but I guess he went by Charles. And but Loomis always said, and he seemed to have known, that his grandfather was A.B. Van Zandt, the famous, well-heeled doctor of theology at Rutgers University Seminary, of which there's this portrait still hanging in the Rutgers University Seminary Library. And so that was the clue that gave us the clue to our family line, which is A.B. Van Zandt. And he goes back to the progenitor of our line, who was Joseph Janse Van Zandt. The family story is that we had some Spanish blood in it, that our progenitor, Joseph Janse, and this it jibes with the real story that this fellow claimed to be from Santander, Spain. I don't know if he was born there or if his family was from there, but he said he was Spanish from Santander, and that he had never used a last name. And so that he, for whatever reason, he wanted to marry in the Dutch Reformed Church, or he wanted perhaps to buy some land or something in America, and so he had to kind of become official and take on a last name. And so the speculation is that he chose the name Van Zandt because it could be that he was from Santander. That's one reason why he could have chosen that name. And we don't know very much about his line or his family before him. There is some independent evidence, some evidence from genetics testing that has marked this person, Joseph Janse Van Zandt, as a carrier of some specific DNA markers that indicate that he might have descended from a Sephardic Jewish line. Sephardic Jews were common in Spain, and they were common in the town of Santander, and they traditionally did not have last names. And so if this person had never used a last name, it's possible that his family had descended from Sephardic Jews, and that he was finally coming into the fold and getting himself a last name and taking on this Dutch identity. And that's all we know. But, of course, that's only one person out of 128, or out of 64. And so it's too much to talk about here, but it's just kind of fun. Of all the things that I've learned and here's what I did. I made a Excel sheet here in which I wrote down each person. I didn't write it down. I counted each person who I found that was the first immigrant to American soil in that family line. And so in each case of each of these people, I went back as far as I could to find the first person who stepped on American soil in that family line. And so I came up with a little Excel sheet showing, for example, that we had in the 9th generation, there were 8 people that arrived from Holland in America. In the 10th generation, there were 22 people that arrived from Holland. In the 11th generation, see, it's going back further and further back into time, and we're now in the 17th century, so like in the end of the 1600s, and even as early as 1630, 1640, which was really only 10 years after the Pilgrims landed, these people were arriving. So we had 30 people from Holland coming in the 12th generation, and 11 people from Holland coming in the 13th generation. And so I added these people up and divided by the number of people in total that belong to that generation, so that I'm showing the share of DNA that person contributed to David Van Zandt. And through my calculations, which are funny, or which are not, they don't really have any meaning, but I just did this. I added these up, and I came up with 23% Dutch. But as I say before, that does not include all the people in America who were born here of Dutch parents. All the Dutch people were marrying Dutch people, and they were having children, but it was in America. So all those people are not counting in my statistics. But these are the people that came to the American shore, and that was 21% Dutch. Then we have, Dad has 1/8, that's 12.5% English. And those people all came really early in the 1600s, all to New York and Albany and that area. Many of them were Puritans. They even have Puritan in their name. And many people, not on Loomis's side, but on Nana's side. I've got many people in Massachusetts and Salem. So there were probably some witch hunters there and people like that. Then the surprising thing for me was on Loomis's side that there were so many. There aren't that many. It's the number is not large. There's about 7 people in Loomis's heritage who came from Ireland, Northern Ireland mostly, but also other places in Ireland. And because they came a little bit later than the Dutch and English people, their DNA contributed a larger share. So for example, if our Norwegian ancestors, who only came 4 generations ago, they contributed quite a bit of DNA to our makeup. So these Irish people came maybe 6th, 7th, 6th, and 5th generation. So they contributed more than the others, and they have 17% Irish. didn't know anything about our Irish heritage. And in addition, there's another interesting one, and that is the French. We have about 6% French heritage, and a lot of those people were Huguenots who originated in France but were driven out of France through the religious wars, and the 30 Years' War, I think, was one of those. And a lot of them went to Holland or Germany they fled the wars in France and went to Holland and Germany, and then from there they emigrated to the United States to try to find religious freedom in the United States. And so we have a French component of Huguenots who were some of the first settlers to come to America, and they went out and they cooperated with the Dutch people. The Dutch Reformed Church was also a Calvinist church, but the Huguenots they had their own form of Calvinism, and they wanted to have their own community, so they built cities, towns, and they're still there with the original buildings and the places where these people settled, and we have those people in our heritage. Then finally, the one other last little interesting note is that one person, a French guy in fact, married a Mohawk princess. So we have 1% or 1/10 of 1%, something like that, is American Native Mohawk ancestry. That's Loomis's side of the family. And then we also get over to Nana's side of the family, which is half of David Van Zandt's DNA. And she has a great deal of English. English. And as I say, many of them came to Massachusetts only a few years after the Mayflower. Nobody on the Mayflower, but these people were coming in the early 1600s, and a lot of them were in Salem, and a lot of them were in other places in Massachusetts, Plymouth and Essex County. Some were from Rhode Island, and again, these were English, and they were settling in English colonies, and so they were marrying other English people, and so as with the Dutch, we have a large percentage of English in our genetics because not only were the people coming from England, but they were also marrying English people in America and having more English people on American soil. So that's a large factor in Nana's makeup. And going back to England, it's fun to see that we do in fact have some ancestors. Obviously, when you have 1 million ancestors like this, when the tree is really huge, you're going to find stuff. You're going to find bad stuff, but you're also going to find stuff like one of our ancestors was related or descended from King Henry V and Catherine de Valois of England. And we have an ancestor that was, we have several ancestors that were lords or what you call counts or sirs, something. They were knights. You always kind of wonder why some people moved here, but in many cases you see that they were Puritans, or they came here for religious reasons, or that they were just adventuresome and wanted to come and colonize and start a new life in America. So that's pretty cool. A lot of them were military, or they joined. They had military offices in America, which probably means that they were either British military or maybe early American Revolutionary military. Lots of captains and colonels and lieutenants and things like that. So I think for that's good for now, don't you think? And I'm going to keep working on this so I can get Mom's side of the family. Mom's side of the family, I think, were more the pioneers. The dad's side of the family were kind of the old elite the old New England elite that settled early here and stayed here in New England and were kind of made up a lot of the upper crust. Whereas Mom's families were more, I think, later immigrants who then became more mobile and were the ones who pioneered and crossed the country, came out to Indiana, and Iowa, and Oregon, etc. So there's some interesting things going on there, but I haven't really done all that work yet, so got to do that later. Okay.